I knew my dog was a problem as soon as I picked him up from the shelter. A huge problem. Absolute terror. The kind of beast that would make anyone tremble with fear. With his pure fluffy fur, he had a terrible habit of sleeping in the sun, wagging his tail at strangers, and running away from his own farts. A real monster. And apparently, the neighbor thought so too. I don't know exactly when she started to get annoyed. Maybe it was the day she saw him barking at a squirrel and decided that was aggressive behavior. Or maybe it was last week when he tried to make friends with her golden retriever and ended up being ignored in such a humiliating way that I almost had to take him to therapy. But the big problem came that fateful morning. I had left the dog in the yard, as I always did. He was busy with his daily routine of sniffing every inch of the grass, digging useless holes, and napping in the sun like a retiree in Florida. That's when the peace ended. I heard the woman scream before I even saw her.
Your dog is dangerous.
I, who was washing the dishes, almost dropped a glass on the floor. I ran outside, thinking something serious had happened. What did I see? The neighbor standing on the sidewalk, pointing at my dog as if it were a wild lion about to attack. The detail? He was sitting down, yawning. It was at that moment that I knew this woman had serious problems. The scene was pathetic. She, with her arms crossed, with an expression of horror, as if she were dealing with a ferocious animal, and on the other side, my dog licking his own paw, completely oblivious to the fact that he was being treated as a national threat. When she realized that I wasn't freaking out with her, she got even angrier.
That dog is a danger to the neighborhood.
Of course, a real predator. Soon he'd be robbing banks and leading dog gangs. I didn't know whether to laugh or worry about her sanity, but one thing was certain. This was only the beginning of the madness. After the first scene worthy of a psychotic break, I should have ignored it. I should have. But there are certain things in life that are impossible to ignore, and one of them is a hysterical neighbor screaming on your sidewalk as if she were witnessing a wild wolf attack. Even more so when the wild wolf is a 5-kilogram dog that looks like an expired plush toy. She was still standing there, looking at me with the same expression as someone would when seeing a crocodile prowling around a playground. The difference was that my dog was literally trying to bite its own tail. The neighbor snorted and pointed her finger at him, as if she were denouncing a war criminal.
This dog has a menacing look on its face.
If I hadn't been so incredulous, I would have laughed, because you see the dog had its tongue hanging out, its eyes half open from sleep and a leaf stuck to its forehead. A menacing look. That's right. But, like any human being with nothing better to do in life, this woman wasn't going to stop there.
I'm an expert in canine behavior. I've had 3 dogs, and I know how to recognize one that can be aggressive.
And I'm an astronaut because I've watched Interstellar 3 times. The patience I didn't even know I had was running out, but I tried to keep my composure, because honestly, when you're in front of someone who says something so ridiculous with such seriousness, you get curious to see where it's going. It was then that she took a dramatic step backwards, as if she needed some distance from the terrible monster.
He's barked at me before. I felt his energy. He's unstable.
He barked at her? He even barks at his own reflection in the window. But then I understood. She meant it. She really meant it. In her mind, my dog wasn't just a dog. It was a public threat, a problem to be solved. And I only realized how obsessed she was when, the next day, a police officer arrived at my door. Yes, she really had filed a complaint. I already knew the neighbor was crazy, but I still had some hope in humanity. That hope died instantly when I saw a town hall car pull up in front of my house. The officer got out of the vehicle with that walk of authority that people have when they think they're going to deal with something important. I almost laughed. Poor guy. He had no idea what kind of nonsense was about to come out of his mouth. We received a report of an aggressive dog at this residence. I didn't even have to ask who had made the complaint. As if it had been rehearsed, the woman appeared out of nowhere, with the posture of someone who thinks she is the defender of morals and good manners. She stood next to the officer with her arms crossed, ready to testify against the monster who was terrorizing the neighborhood. I looked out into the yard. The monster in question was biting its own tail and tripping over its own paws. The officer read a few more things from the clipboard, and with each word, my faith in humanity diminished a little more. My dog had been charged with aggressive barking, and the part that almost made me lose my composure, having an intimidating stare. I looked out into the yard again, just to make sure we were talking about the same dog. Yes, it was him. The only animal that had ever tried to fight with a stick and lost. I knew there was no point in arguing with the woman, so I simply opened the gate and let the officer in to assess the beast. The dog opened one of its eyes, looked at him, let out a yawn worthy of someone who hadn't slept for 5 years, and lay back down. The officer scratched his head. He made some notes on his clipboard and looked at his neighbor, who now looked like she was about to have an aneurysm. "Your dog doesn't look dangerous," the woman almost exploded. It was as if someone had said the earth was flat right in front of her. The officer was already preparing to leave, but she, of course, didn't know how to lose. Her eyes blazing with anger, she let loose with all the certainty in the world.
If the town hall doesn't do anything, I'm going to solve this problem myself.
That was the moment I knew. This was far from over. If there's one thing I've learned in life, it's that some people just can't accept losing. They can be 100% wrong, but they'll still find a way to double down and make everything worse. And this neighbor, she was the worst kind. After the city official said that my dog wasn't a threat, I thought she was going to freak out in front of me, rant a bit, and then disappear. But no. She looked at me in a frighteningly calm way, like she already had a plan B up her sleeve. And as expected, her plan B was to be even more unbearable. The next day I woke up to a strange noise outside. It wasn't barking, it wasn't wind, it wasn't anything ordinary. I went to the window and almost choked with hatred. The woman was in my yard. Yes, she invaded my house. And for what? To stick ridiculous posters on my gate. Posters that said things like, "Caution, dangerous dog," and "violent animal, keep children away." Now, let's take a moment to reflect. Did she think the town hall did nothing? Fine. But what was her solution? She invented her own law and went around nailing up signs like she was the sheriff of the neighborhood. I opened the door with such force that I almost knocked her over. She didn't even startle. On the contrary, she turned to me with that, "I'm doing this for the good of everyone" look, as if she wasn't literally invading private property to spread lies.
This is to protect people,
She said, with the calm of someone who truly believes in their own madness. My eyes went to the dog, which at that very moment was sitting with its tongue out, trying to lick the air as if it were catching something invisible. A ferocious animal indeed. I could feel my patience evaporating. If I tried to argue, she'd just turn me into the villain of the story. So I did the only sensible thing. I picked up my cell phone and called the police. She even tried to play it smart and say that she wasn't doing anything wrong. But when I mentioned trespassing, she paled. And so it was that, minutes later, she had the pleasure of explaining to a policeman why the hell she was sticking fake posters in other people's yards at 7 in the morning. I wanted to believe that now she would calm down. But, of course, she didn't. Because some people don't learn even when they get out of a situation in handcuffs. If there's one thing I've learned from this whole experience, it's that some people simply can't accept losing. For them, a no doesn't mean the end of the conversation, but the start of a personal war. And this neighbor, she took it to a whole new level. After the poster fiasco, I thought she would at least be embarrassed enough to disappear from my life. But no, the next day she came back. It was about 6 in the morning when I was woken up by a strange noise in the yard. At first, I thought it was the dog up to something, but when I looked out of the window, my blood ran cold. The woman was there, and it wasn't to stick up posters this time. She was trying to open the gate. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me, because, you see, who in their right mind tries to invade someone's house after they've already been reported to the police? But there she was, crouching down, fiddling with the lock with something in her hands. The scariest thing? She seemed completely calm. It wasn't an outburst. It wasn't a fit of rage. She was doing it as if it were the most normal thing in the world, as if she had every right to come into my yard and solve the problem that the city council refused to solve. The whole situation would have been comical if it hadn't been terrifying. My dog, the great danger of the neighborhood, was standing a few meters away from it, looking at me through the window with a sleepy face, not understanding what was going on. He didn't even bark. The irony? If he was really aggressive, that's when he would have attacked. But he didn't. He just stood there, wagging his tail, not even realizing that this woman wanted to end his life. That's when I realized she really thought she was right. She had convinced herself that she was doing the neighborhood a favor, that no one else had the courage to act, so it was up to her to take care of that 5-kilogram threat. I didn't even think twice. I picked up the phone and called the police on the spot. I didn't shout at her, I didn't open the door, I didn't try to talk. I'd already learned that there's no point in arguing with people like that. It was best to let the consequences take care of themselves. In less than 10 minutes, a police car pulled up in front of my house. And then, for the first time, the neighbor realized that she had gone too far. She froze, looking at the policeman getting out of the car. Her hand was still on the lock when one of the officers asked, "May I ask what you're doing?" You could see in her eyes that she hadn't expected this, but like any clueless person, she tried to play the victim.
I just wanted to check that the dog was tied up. He's a danger to the neighborhood.
The policewoman looked out into the yard. My dog, realizing he was the center of attention, yawned so lazily that he almost fell over sideways. The policewoman said nothing, just raised an eyebrow and crossed her arms. It was the first time I'd seen anyone look at that woman exactly the way she deserved, with pure contempt. She still tried to argue, tried to say she was worried about the children, tried to blame me, the dog, the justice system, but it was no use. Because, you see, trespassing is a crime. And so I had the indescribable pleasure of seeing that woman being handcuffed in front of my house. She squawked, tried to struggle, but none of that mattered anymore. This time, she had no escape. The funniest thing? My dog didn't even notice that his greatest enemy was being taken into custody. He had already gone back to sleep. In the end, he was much more civilized than a lot of people out there. Have you ever had to deal with someone like that? That person who just can't accept losing and takes everything too far? Let me know in the comments. And if you like this surreal story, like it and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. Want to watch more insane videos? Click on the card and come marathon. See you in the next video.